Today we're telling the side of the Epstein story that no one wants to touch. The one that you very rarely see on YouTube because it's that dangerous. Inside of the video, you are going to see some disturbing things that you need to know about. Things that are being covered up and things that some people don't want you to see. This is the story that you're definitely gonna wanna sit down for and have your tea or coffee, although you may not be able to drink it with the things that you're about to see. Let's dive in.
3.5 million documents revealing one of the darkest abuses of power,
where women and children as young as 12 describe rape, sexual abuse, and trafficking.
Oh my gosh, I was 14 years old. Like, what the hell do you know when you're that young?
at the highest levels of society.
Even after Epstein was convicted in 2008 for crimes, including one involving a minor, the visitors kept coming.
And nothing happened.
You have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you.
Over 24 people have resigned, CEOs, members of government worldwide, but I haven't seen any arrests or investigations here in the United States.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
I think this is a massive cover-up. All over the world, we are being lied to.
Americans have flooded the streets to protest police brutality, for women's rights, against ICE, and even for Gaza. So how can something this disturbing only produce this?
What an amazing question that actually is. We as Americans are known for protesting things that we are not okay with. And I know many of you watching here are not okay with the things that happen within the Epstein files. So why is everything so quiet? Is it the distractions going on around the world for other things? Or is it that people are fearing speaking out about something that we all know was clearly wrong and evil?
There's a concept that helps explain what's going on here called the Overton window. It's the range of ideas that a society considers acceptable, what feels normal to talk about or believe. Everything within the window is seen as reasonable, and what is outside it is not, to varying degrees, from not very normal to radical to unthinkable. But that window isn't fixed. It can shift over time. And one of the ways it shifts is through repeated exposure to the extreme, the unthinkable. Not because it will be accepted by the masses, but because it makes the less extreme things seem more acceptable. And in the process of being repeatedly exposed to the unthinkable itself becomes familiar too. I believe there are 4 forces pushing that window in the United States towards a place where something like the Epstein files doesn't mobilize people. It overwhelms them.
I think that this sliding scale that she put together is actually incredible, giving us a visual as to why we are becoming more exposed and more okay with some of this incredible exposure that we're getting. We're kind of becoming used to this type of terrible stuff. And part of this, in my opinion, has to do with because of the exposure we have to it. Think 20 years ago, the only way that we found out news was from television, and television was highly censored. But right now, horrible things can happen, and we will see them, no censorship on social media. We can see anything that we want to now, and we're becoming desensitized as a society.
The first is the most obvious: desensitization. Years ago, these files may have triggered a political crisis and protests across the US, like these events from Trump's first presidency.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the...
They came from across the country.
President Trump signing a new executive order imposing a 90-day ban on visas for citizens from 6 Muslim-majority countries.
It was a huge crowd, and a loud and an angry one. And I say huge.
They seem tame compared to what we've learned from the Epstein files.
Here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center, and he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide.
Jesus.
No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness.
Thank you for a fun night. Your little girl was a little naughty.
The difference is, today, these files emerge in a society that has already been pushed far beyond its previous limits, because even the most unsettling written testimony cannot rival the impact of what people have seen and heard themselves.
Towns and cities have been reduced to rubble and dust.
It is no exaggeration to say that the live-streamed genocide of Gaza fundamentally changed the world forever, on a material level and on a psychological level.
This is what I'm talking about. The things that we have the ability to see, the things that are at our exposure right now. Part of us, I think we like that the censorship is gone, and we like that we can know actually what's happening. But are our minds built to handle these types of things? If you think about soldiers that go away to war and see terrible things happen, they come back and many of them suffer with PTSD and things of that nature from what they are seeing. Now, we're not here on the battlefields. We're not there seeing our allies, injured or worse, but we are getting snippets of those things that are happening, which, no, it's not enough to give us something as severe as PTSD, but it definitely can shape our minds, and not in a good way. Because of the nature of some of the videos that I create here on the channel, YouTube will sometimes demonetize or allow me to not make any money from the videos. In that case, it's always helpful, and I appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel, and if you have the ability to become a member, because that can support me even when YouTube isn't supporting me on those videos. So if you're able to do that, I appreciate it.
What was seen was so shocking that across the world, people took to the streets in the millions.
From Barcelona to Athens, Mexico City to Rio de Janeiro.
With time, the horrors Israel unleashed on Gaza escalated. But the mass mobilization didn't. What psychology tells us is that the human brain is not built to remain in a constant state of alarm. There is a process known as habituation, where repeated exposure to the same stimulus gradually reduces the intensity of our emotional response to it. Not because the stimulus becomes less severe, but because the brain, in order to function, has to adapt. It has to dampen the response so that it can function and survive. It's in this America that the Epstein files are released. These documents are landing on people whose threshold for horror has already been pushed far beyond where it used to be. And written testimony, no matter how disturbing, cannot compete with what people have seen with their own eyes.
I remember back in the day, I would hate watching the news because watching the news was being exposed to terrible things, terrible people making terrible decisions, hurting others, and it was just not something that was enjoyable to watch. It was disturbing. It was sad. That was just a powerful moment inside of this video, showing all of that pain that people had to deal with, and also showing all of the brutality that us as humans are capable of. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a difficult video for some people to watch, but it is showing what's actually happening.
But desensitization alone doesn't explain it, because people still have the capacity to process and then organize, except that that ability is under attack too. And that brings us to the second force: a sustained war on the mind.
War on the mind.
We're living in an age of short-form content and shorter attention spans. Every event, no matter how significant, is dropped into this constant, fast-moving feed where it has to compete for attention with everything else. In this digital environment, the way something is presented becomes just as important as what it contains. After almost 7 years of slow dripping information and waiting, all at once, 3.5 million files are dumped. It's overwhelming by design. Unorganized, heavily redacted, and difficult to navigate.
She said, it's difficult by design, implying that the powers that be don't want it investigated. They don't want answers to come out. They don't want people to be prosecuted. By design, this has been a complete mess, and something that has been stretched out over months and months, years and years. And I sometimes wonder if we'll ever get to the end of it.
This release requires time and attention to sift through, things that the average person is already struggling with. And for journalists and content creators to get through all of this is going to be a long and slow process. And in a world of 24-hour news cycles and short attention spans, maintaining the emotional momentum in order to translate into any kind of mobilization is difficult.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I see now, nobody has our side. Neither one of these groups, it feels like, have our side. You feel like it's just all these articles. It's like, well, here's an article about this is going to happen, and then people get in an uproar about it. But nobody, it's almost like it's all algorithmed perfectly to the amount of our attention span, where it just fades out of like the zeitgeist of discussion.
The information overload is intentional, to kill our ability to sit and process what has happened, and instead leave us constantly reacting. And this brings us to another layer of this war on the mind. It's not just a war on our attention, but a war on the truth as well.
Every lie Donald Trump has told in the first 154 days of the Trump presidency.
There was a time in the US media landscape when it was genuinely shocking that a sitting US president would blatantly lie on camera. That's not really the case anymore. It's almost like the assumed baseline is that the president is lying, and that has just become normalized. This has happened alongside other assaults on the truth as well. The emergence of AI,
viewed millions of times, showing just how fast fake photos can spread like wildfire.
And the mass awakening many Americans have been experiencing about their own history, unearthing so many lies that were fed to them by the government.
This is how freedom is spread, okay? The West is the best.
Somewhere in all this, something changed in how truth functions in American life.
There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he tracked to other individuals.
So this is a Democrat hoax.
If we had information, we meaning the Department of Justice, about men who abused women, we would prosecute them.
One thing that I don't like that's going on right now is how everything is about one side versus the other. Democrats versus Republicans, Republicans versus Democrats. At the end of the day, we're all people, and although both sides have different beliefs, we all should be upstanding people, good people that want to do well by others. And I think that is being forced. That gap between is being spread, making it larger and larger, having the sides hate one another. And a lot of that has to do with the political landscape over the last 10 years. And in my opinion, it's pulling away from the attention to the important things, like the crimes that went on within the Epstein files. And it's pulling away from the attention that should be in the right spot. Instead, it's on hatred and putting blame on a side versus then on an individual person.
This is only 300 gigabytes of the estimated 15 terabytes of data seized from Jeffrey Epstein.
Do you understand how large that is? 300 gigs of 14,000 terabytes. This is just the tippy tip of the iceberg. There's so much there, and it's going to take 10 years, if not more, to get through all this at the pace that we're going at it right now.
What's in the millions of other files that haven't been released? Who are the redacted names? Why is this being released now? And is it a distraction from something else? When people can't tell what's true, the window shifts without ever really noticing it. Because how can you mobilize against something you can't truly understand? Which brings us to the third point.
A huge pro-Palestine demonstration took place today in the nation's capital.
The biggest nationwide days of protest since the killing of George Floyd in police custody.
Over the past decade, Americans have mobilized a lot. And despite it all, they've seen little to no structural response. If anything, the current administration shows how the US has only slid further towards fascism, and now picking up another horrible and extremely unpopular war on Iran.
We are at a point where no one is even trying to pretend that ethics laws apply to them. No one seems concerned about being held accountable for anything, and corruption that would have once been an unprecedented scandal gets swept aside in the daily torrent of atrocities being committed around the globe by the Trump regime.
The empire is on a downward spiral, and the illusion that people can do much to change it is dying. Psychology has a term for this: learned helplessness. When repeated attempts to change an outcome fail, people start to internalize the belief that their actions don't matter. And none of this is happening in a vacuum. The average American is struggling, and people don't have infinite emotional capacity. When survival itself is exhausting, outrage becomes a luxury. And then they get the Epstein files, where, to top it all off, unlike previous moments that have led to Americans protesting, the villain isn't clear. Before, it's been the police, or Trump, or Israel, or ICE. But here, it's the entire establishment elite.
Yes.
Regardless of their politics on paper or how far some may seem from one another, they're bound by their participation or enabling of this massive network of pedophiles. The monster seems so big and all-powerful that it can be hard to know what to protest or who to aim it at.
The word that she said is one that I use a lot on the channel. And it's a word that some of you in the comments don't think is actually fitting. The word elite. What makes these people elite? Why are they being called the elite? And I think in this case, elite is being used in a term of financial success and just success of their career. When you think of the people that were just shown on the screen regarding the Epstein files and their involvement, all of them have been highly successful, very rich people. So when we talk about elite here on the channel and on others as well, that is the type of person that we're talking about. And unfortunately, these elite live along the lines of a different set of rules and laws than us, the common man and the common woman.
If everything feels corrupted, nothing feels actionable. And what isn't actionable slowly becomes acceptable. Last is one of the most powerful forces in moving the Overton window: the media. The more they focus on a story through a certain framing, the more that framing becomes fact and any other considered conspiracy. The American mainstream media covered the story extensively and framed the story to be within the same world as the Diddy scandal, Me Too, and Harvey Weinstein. That this is just about rich and powerful perverts being perverts, and ignored the other element.
What happened in that massage room, I assume, was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever.
That this sadistic and horrifying network routinely abused children, most likely for blackmail and leverage.
The infamous Lolita Express, their private plane used to transport young girls and high-profile friends, including Bill Clinton.
She also told me in that meeting that the private plane that she and Jeffrey used, was wired for audio, video.
And the evidence highly suggests that they were Mossad assets.
They were all essentially commodities to him, traded for the advantage of one single cause, which is Israel. That was the motive. And we know he had, extensive high-level connections to the Israeli regime, to its government, to security, intelligence, its financing circles, its business community. That was the means that went with the motive. So it's a story about Israeli influence in the highest corridors of power and wealth.
Epstein had a very close relationship with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who would stay at his apartment so frequently that Epstein's staff called it Ehud's apartment.
He was sort of an unofficial ambassador who could use this network that they had created together to be kind of a front man, an advance man for the Israeli regime.
So Epstein served as an advisor to Barak, and he was facilitating introductions to tech investors and financial firms. One of them was Palantir. That's the US-based data analytics firm founded by Peter Thiel, and they are deeply involved in government and surveillance. Here is a clip from a call between Epstein and Barak.
Palantir is Peter Thiel's company.
Palantir, P-A-L-A-N-T-I-E-R?
Yes.
Epstein tried to procure cyber weapons for Israel. Aren't we done? Like, that's it. Like, is there someone who's not connected to a government and their intelligence agencies that tries to get cyber weapons for that government?
The mystery of the woman next to Jeffrey Epstein.
Ghislaine Maxwell, accused of being Epstein's right-hand woman.
Ghislaine Maxwell's father was Robert Maxwell,
A media and publishing tycoon who owned the Daily Mirror.
Was one of the most important and powerful people in British public life in the 70s and 80s.
a man with long suspected ties to the Mossad, who mysteriously died when he fell from his yacht.
His body was brought to Israel to be buried in Jerusalem's Mount of Olives. That's a graveyard reserved for Israel's elite servants. His funeral was attended by Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, Israeli President Chaim Herzog, and at least 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence. A lot of Mossad agents at that funeral.
Epstein quotes a book called Robert Maxwell, Israel's Super Spy, in an email titled, "He Was Passed Away." Epstein's lawyer was Alan Dershowitz.
The informant believed Dershowitz was co-opted by Mossad and subscribed to their mission. For the confidential human source, remembered Dershowitz tell Alex Acosta, the U.S. Attorney Southern District of Florida at the time, that Epstein belonged to both U.S. and Allied intelligence services. CHS shared phone calls between Dershowitz and Epstein during which she took notes. After these calls, Mossad would then call Dershowitz to debrief.
And Epstein's very close friends were these Norwegian diplomats who were famous for playing a key role in the Oslo Accords, the peace plan that many Palestinians see as having been a trap for Palestinians.
Was one of the architects of the Oslo Peace Accords.
The diplomat Rod Larson, quote, wrote official letters of recommendation to US authorities to secure visas for young Russian women in Epstein's orbit, claiming they possessed extraordinary abilities suitable for research roles. He also calls him his best friend. So why does mainstream US media suppress this story?
Can we discuss the blackmail operation that was taking place and which government that's a special ally of the United States put him up to it? And do we really want to be allies with a country that kidnaps young girls for rape just so they can have dirt on American politicians and control our foreign policy?
Spoiler alert, the topic was changed promptly to Epstein's relationship with Russia.
Possible connections between convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein and Russian intelligence services.
Growing suspicions of a Russian connection.
Fueling speculation that Epstein could have been working for Russia.
Imagine if the story was Epstein tried to procure cyber weapons for China. Do you think we'd be talking about that nonstop? Of course. Everybody would be like, China, our mortal enemy, China. Or just a random country, Kenya. Like, I imagine New York Times, CNN would be like, whoa, Kenya's all over the Epstein files. And it turns out he was trying to get cyber weapons for Kenya. He was trying to get America to bomb Kenya's neighbors on behalf of Kenya. Wow, what an amazing story. When it's Israel, shh.
The Israel connection is undeniable. Ignoring this or letting this fact just slip by allows the idea of this happening to become acceptable and normal.
There have been so many claims over the last 5 minutes of this. I've been a little bit quiet, just kind of absorbing and listening. But the connections to other areas of the world, the Epstein files, and even presidencies is almost undeniable with how this is all being framed. I'm really curious as to what you guys think. Is all of this connected to Israel, and is it more than just a ped ring? Curious.
Investigations are now underway in at least 10 countries.
Britain's former Prince Andrew has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
Norway is living through the crisis the US never had over the Epstein files. The country's former prime minister and top diplomats found themselves under police investigation and forced out of their roles.
Lord Mandelson had been sacked as US ambassador because more links with Jeffrey Epstein had emerged.
What happens in the heart of the empire doesn't stay there. What the Epstein files reveal is not just the moral depravity of a few individuals, but how the system that governs all of us works.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
That statement bothers me because we're not talking about Jeffrey Epstein. We're talking about the entire network around Jeffrey Epstein and all of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, many of which, more than 3/4 of the people, we don't even know about. They haven't come forward. We know a small basket of people that have said that they were victims of Epstein. How about all the other ones that never came forward? How about all the other ones that never made it? These are something that are just being brushed under the rug. Excavating his properties, trying to find burial grounds. Why have we heard nothing of this? I'm not convinced it's even being done.
And the reception of the files reveals how this system is able to sustain itself. It doesn't try to hide anything, but it reveals just enough in a world that's already been pushed too far to respond. Now we can see this as a push of the Overton window, or we can identify the common denominator involved in all of these elements that's already been sitting at the far, far end of the spectrum for a very long time. Israel. And instead of a push, maybe this is all a pull. Because the levels of moral depravity involved here have long been within the Zionist Overton window.
He described the dog attack as saying soldiers laughed and recorded the sexual assaults.
We found booby-trapped children's toys and canned food planted by the occupation, meaning Israel, to cause more casualties.
It doesn't matter who your enemy is, you need to destroy their offspring to prevent them from creating more offspring.
That is extremely dark. They're talking about the offspring, children. That's difficult.
And that pull has become even more clear in the US and Israel's latest collaboration, the war on Iran.
A heartbreaking deadly strike on an Iranian girls' elementary school on the first day of the war.
There were students ranging from 7 to 12 years old.
Lebanon's declared a day of mourning.
She was 4 years old and called Lamar, an angel to her family. When they found her body, she'd been decapitated.
They've hit the same benchmarks. Repeated lies.
If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon.
Weaponized helplessness. And media complicity.
For the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
A world that has failed to stop the genocide in Gaza and failed to bring justice to the powerful around Epstein is what paved the way for what is happening now, where the people of Iran, Lebanon, and Palestine are experiencing levels of savagery that were once debilitating for us to watch in Gaza.
My son was just out playing. How can he be here now? I can't see him anymore. I can't look into his beautiful eyes. I have no words anymore.
The baby is good to get.
Really? In Lebanon?
Yes, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Iran. Children.
What Jeffrey Epstein built on that island and in that house and in that ranch weren't anomalies. They were concentrated versions of how power already operates, spaces where the rules don't even apply. Even when it's exposed at this scale, nothing breaks. What we're collectively living through is a war on truth and justice and basic human decency. We're being dragged towards accepting barbarism, of normalizing the lack of morality in power. They try to constantly overwhelm us with increasing levels of violence so that we may somehow come to accept it someday. But it is our duty and our moral imperative to resist that, even if it's just within ourselves, every day.
If you made it to this point in the video, you understand why this was a very important yet difficult topic to tackle. There's many instances inside of this video that were disturbing, but were truthful. I have to give credit to the YouTube channel Uncivilized for this incredible video. I'll be linking it down below in case you want to give them a subscription. And if you want to know more on the Epstein files, deeper dives that I've done here on the channel, this video is one that you should go check out. Remember guys, I'll see you over there.